So this next video is called Finding God in Your Everyday Life. So what's the issue? The issue is that we have so many things going on in our life. We have so many things pulling for our attention. We have work, we have emails, friends, family, children, hobbies. Maybe you're involved in certain volunteer opportunities. How do I reconcile all those things? How do I have God all the time? How do I feel His presence all the time? Am I supposed to? So I really believe that God wants to bring all those tensions and frustrations we have, where we think that He's kind of away from us, or we think that I have to struggle with these things, I have to weed through all these things so that I can find God and have Him. And that's just not the case. Because even in all those frustrations, even in all those busyness, that busyness of life that we live every day, it seems like the older I get, the busier I get, God is still there. And He wants us to feel Him there. So I want to talk about the two Thereses, St Therese of Lisieux and Mother Teresa. St Therese of Lisieux was a Carmelite nun living in the early 20th century. She entered the convent when she was 15, very early. She died at the age of 24. By her own accord and writing, she lived a very simple life, a very ordinary life. Once she entered the convent, she never left. She was there. And a year after she died, all of her writings were published, and today they're known as The Story of a Soul. It's a best-selling book. I'll put a link down at the bottom so you can check it out. And what she's famous for is finding God in the smallest of things. So as Teresa was reading and growing up and being formed in her theology, she's reading about great stories of the saints. She's reading about miracles and healings and visions, and she never experienced any of that like you and me. She just lived an ordinary Christian life. But not long after her death, maybe 2 decades, she was declared a saint, which is very fast. It's very unusual. And her point is that you don't have to do great things to be a saint. You don't have to go out and just radically live with the poor. Maybe you should if you could, or maybe that's your thing. But her point, her mission, as she grew closer to the Lord, she realized that holiness can be found in the simplest things, in the simplest task of her normal everyday life. And she does this quite well. So what does that look like for you and me? It could look like when you're driving on the freeway in traffic. It could look like just accepting that you're going to be stuck there for a while and having peace about it. It could look like dealing with a certain coworker who you don't want to deal with or you don't want to be around. It could look like having patience with them and loving them as best as you can. It could look like going out and serving the poor. But her point is that in the simplest of tasks, no matter what you do, no matter where you are, do it with love. The littlest task that you have, if you're making your bed, do it with love. If you're washing dishes, if you're doing whatever, cutting the grass, connect to the Lord. Say, I'm doing this work. I'm going to do it for you. No matter what I do, it's okay. Think the stupidest things, the littlest thing, vacuuming. Give everything to the Lord, and that's her point. And then we have, Mother Teresa. What could we not say about her? She's this little woman, probably 5 foot nothing. And she really fell in love with the little way of Teresa of Lisieux. And she gave her whole life to the poor. And yet again, she said, you can't do great things. You can do no great things. You can only do little things with great love. And, at the last quarter of the 20th century, I can't think of anyone who was in the news more than Mother Teresa. I can't think of anyone who was more popular than Mother Teresa. And we think of like popularity and fame and money, and this woman had nothing. Like she gave away everything, you know, even herself to people that she didn't even know because she loved them. So yet again, we have someone who took that model of finding joy and holiness and purpose in the simplest of things, just serving. So, what opportunities do we have to serve? What opportunities do we have to love people in the simplest of ways, in the simplest of in simple moments? And I think as Christians, as Catholics, as whatever you are, we have to fall in love with the ordinary. Again, we have to fall in love with the simple, with the humbleness of life. We want things to be amazing all the time. We want things to be so complex and just so organized and decorated, and we want everything decorated, even ourselves. We want to build monuments to ourselves with the big house, the big car, all these toys and that we don't really need anyway. But there's something to be said about the ordinary. And I want to end with a quote by G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton is a journalist writing in the early 20th century. Even though he has no formal background in theology, he's a amazing Christian writer and theologian. And he says, "The most extraordinary thing in the world is an ordinary man and an ordinary woman and their ordinary children."